morning. After what's been about a 3-week hiatus, we're finally back out for the first time scouting a field to see if we can finish planting the rest of these soybeans. This is a lighter field that doesn't really struggle to drain well except for these terrace bottoms. So I'm out here walking it, seeing if we're going to be able to get through here and plant these beans. There's about 2 inches of rain in the forecast at the end of this week, supposedly spread over 4 days. 2 inches of rain over 4 days is much different than 2 inches of rain in 1 day, especially when you're dealing with these terraces, as they are prone to flooding and ponding over time. Obviously they all have tile drains to help get the water out. However, if you get enough water, they're going to have some moisture in here for a while. I'm about halfway up the field. There's 3 terraces staggered across here. We're going to see if it's going to be dry enough to plant. This one still has a little bit of moisture in it. However, that's not any problem for the planter at all. I would imagine that there'd be moisture out there in June if it didn't rain at all. Just the type of farm we're working with here. There's a little bit of moisture in this one as well. Nothing that's going to stop the tractor by any means. It's actually relatively rough out on the field. It may justify hooking up the field cultivators again, coming out and busting this ground open to level it out. I'd hate to powder it ahead of a rain. This light ground tends to get packed down very easily with a shower on top of it. That's one of our main apprehensions to planting this farm at this current state. If we get a good rain over the weekend, it may inhibit this crop from being able to get out of the ground. We've got to be very careful when farming these lighter fields, especially compared to our darker fields that seem to have no issue breaking out of the ground as the soil stays warmer from the sunlight reflection. These more marginal farms have a different set of struggles than some of our other fields. Dad and I will probably hash this over, see whether or not we want to take the risk and plant it or not. Not sure what's in store later on in this week or the next week. Maybe June before we can get these planted. I say hammer down. I'm gonna go talk with Dad and see what we come up with. It's all fun and games walking out to a field to scout until you realize how far you've gotten away from your pickup truck. It's a little chilly out today and a little breezy. Definitely warmer than it was on Saturday morning, but by Saturday evening you couldn't even tell that it had frozen that morning. I had a t-shirt on, 65 degrees. Today we're working with about mid-50s. It's gonna warm up as the day goes on. The end of the week, as I said, rain, but we are gonna have about 75-degree weather, which is perfect. That's one of the encouraging factors to planting this field right now. Dad's getting his planter backed out. We did a little further inspection out in the gator in the field. We're gonna give it one more day, let it air out a little bit more before we plant it. We're gonna have to look at the forecast too. I've actually heard that the high rain chance has gone up to 2 to 4 inches. That makes a massive difference in our considerations for when we're gonna plant that field. We're just getting things staged right now. We're gonna be replanting corn tomorrow. Hopefully finish planting beans with this planter. Dad likes to get his planter out a little bit in advance and let his GPS data get on the dome. I'm not quite sure that even makes sense, but he's the boss. We've got the field cultivators unhooked right now. One of our field cultivating tractors is there. The other one's tucked in there behind the combine. Obviously we've got the vertical till, it hasn't moved all season. We'll probably have to bring them back out and hook up to the cultivators. The ground, although we were planning on no-tilling it, is a little bit uneven. It's gonna be very rough, a lot of water across it. May have worked it a little too wet with the vertical till last fall. I think it's going to help to air that ground out. The light ground, you have to be very careful with overworking it, because if you turn it into a powder and it gets a rain on it pretty quickly, it will seal over like concrete and the beans will not come up. We're going to wait, stage everything up to get ready to replant tomorrow and plant the rest of the beans. I'm not sure if we'll be able to tell if we need to replant any soybeans or not. Time will tell on that. Probably won't do any this week. I will say we may start replanting corn, although it's still pretty early. See, we got a decent stand out there, except for where Dad put the planter down and forgot to back up. He always does that. We're doing our first replanting project of the year, so we're going to do a little bit of grab bag special here. Yeah, I could tell you what hybrid's in there for sure. Looks like there's probably 3 or 4 different hybrids in this bag. We're not replanting very much, so 1 bag should be enough. It's a small project, we won't need very much seed. Not quite sure what hybrid's in there. It's somewhere between a 108-day and 114-day blend. Both green and red, from what I can tell. If you recall, our first field of corn we planted, we were having issues with the offsets on our Green Star affecting our row shutoffs on our planter, and we were checking everything over and we realized we were off a little bit. So for the first 4 or 5 rounds of this field, every in row has about an 8-foot gap or so. We have to come back in and replant them. If you don't put something in there, it's just going to be weeds. 8 foot is enough to justify having the planter out here to replant. The most you can get away with in corn is 60 inches of a gap. Some people actually do plant their corn that wide. We're going to come down as far as we got before we realize the problem and replant that in real quick. That's where we only need a little bit of seed. Not even technically replanting because it was never planted in the first place. Look at that beast unfold. Woo! Fans running, priming the units. He's ready to rock and roll. Looks like we have an issue with one row right here. I'm gonna go get a hoe and crack that open and put some seeds in there because that's maybe 50 foot unplanted corn. I can fix that myself. He's headed to replant. As if the frost wasn't enough damage to this field, now we got some massive tracts out here. Surprisingly, most of that corn will survive. It's small. A little bit of frost damage still showing its ugly face out here in this field along the edge. Already putting on new tissue down below though. We need that warm weather. There he goes, putting a little bit in. Very small amount. He's lifted up, headed back to the other end. We're gonna do this manually. Got my little strip dug out with the shovel. Not exactly a highly precise, well dug line. Would have been a lot better off with a hoe as opposed to a shovel, but we'll make do. Be a miracle. If half these seeds come up, I'll be satisfied. Do one about every 4 or 5 inches. Having a hard time being precise with this method. Not exactly the work of an Exactamerge planter. I'm more like a 50-year-old air seeder at best. This just exemplifies how good our planters are, that they can plant an accurate stand. I was aiming for 4 to 5 inches in between each seed. I think realistically I've got about 80,000 plants per acre equivalent in this one strip, but I'm hoping that the rows on the outside will compensate for yield, and these will just help with weed pressure. So I'm going to go ahead and push this dirt over it, pack it down a little bit. It should come up soon. Maybe use a shovel. I'm gonna have to use a shovel. Give it a month and you won't even be able to tell that was ever replanted. Nah, just kidding. You'll definitely know. I don't even know if a third of that will come up. But if a third of it does come up, since I planted about 80,000, it'll be right where we need it. Dad's finishing up over here, replanting this part of the field. Took me just as long to do just this little strip manually as it did for him to do about 6 rounds with the planter, just in spots. Just shows you how efficient these planters are. He's still going at it out there. I've got to go work on something else, so I'm going to leave him to his own devices and go hook up a field cultivator. We're going to hook up to that field cultivator, that way we can work ground this afternoon or tomorrow when the ground is fit. Let's go get that 4-wheel drive tractor. There's Dad way off in the distance coming home with the planter. He's just zipping down the road. If you're wondering why we're only going to hook up one field cultivator, the last 2 farms of soybeans we have left aren't really going to amount to that much acreage. There's no reason to get 2 field cultivators out for that. Just let the other ones sit there and not get dirty. The reason we're leaving them outside and we have the tractors inside is because these rainfalls we get in the spring after we're done planting do an excellent job of preliminarily washing our field cultivators off. They collect a lot of dirt as they're out there in the fields, taking that topsoil off, shuffling around a little bit, preparing our seed bed. And these rains we get on them are just like a nice little pre-wash. That way when we get the power washer out, we don't have to work as hard. I am looking for a specific one that has a battery shut off. We have small little tricks to know which 4-wheel drive is what. We need to just start labeling them, put like a number on them. Fortunately, it is this one right here. Battery shut off was my indicator. Very nice to have that. Should be able to squeeze out of here without backing that planter out. Oh yeah, plenty of room. Let's check the oil. Good to go, plenty of oil. You're not going to find better rat packers than us. Not even 2 inches of play in there. I better hurry or I'm going to get run over. There's my gal just sitting there waiting to finish up. Is this good enough for a farm tour right here? Just do a little panoramic around the barn. There you go. It's all our equipment, everyone. Welcome to the farm. Backing her on up. Chris is here to help me with this one. Very convenient that I can see the hitch pin. Looks like it's going to be a little high. Way too high. Chris, you're not going to be able to make a difference on that. It's a field cultivator. Alright, we got it straightened out a little bit with the hydraulics. Dad's cranking it down a hair. We hooked up in no time. Perfect. Hopefully there's no flat tires after it's been sitting here for a while. Fingers crossed. It's always a nice little treat when we unfold these things and the tires are still aired up. Usually don't count on being so, but looks like they are. Alright, we're ready to hit the field. Look how clean this is from the rain it's had on it. Perfect. Alright, this is where she'll rest until that field's ready. This is exactly what I'm talking about. As of 2 hours ago, we were not going to be working this field today. I go home for lunch, come back, and Dad's out here working the field. It's coming up a little bit wet behind the tire tracks, it looks like. It looks like he's dragging up a little bit. Say something to do with this. Might need to go in a little deeper. That's a little wet, but that's not that bad. But we're also in the drier part of the field. Now can I mess with it? Dad and I decided we're going to wait another day on it. We've got about 2 to 3 days before the rain comes in. Like I said many times, not too ambitious to plant this ahead of a rain. However, if we don't get it planted now, it may be June. So he's going to go ahead and finish working up there, park it behind the house for the day. We're going to go find something else to do. You see that dust out there, you would think that it's actually drier than it is, but sometimes dust is not always indicative of what the ground condition actually is. The only person with the authority to work Dad's yard is Dad himself. The ground's coming up a lot heavier than I was hoping it would. As I've mentioned before, we were not planning on working this at all. We were going to just stale seed bed, no till into it. It's pretty rough. I don't know when we vertical till it this fall, if it was too wet and we ended up leaving ridges out in the field, or for some other reason the ground just did not stay as level as we'd like. This is going to help air out the ground a little bit, warm it up as it's been kind of cool the last few days. We'll be able to plant our seed in it tomorrow after we work it. This section of the field right here is an ideal seed bed. I don't know if it got worked a couple extra times in the fall or what, but you can see when the field cultivator went through here, it left a nice powder that the planter would be able to plant into without any trouble at all. But as you go back up there to the hill where it's a little bit more moist, you see it's a lot cloddier. Clods cause issues with moisture, aeration, and emergence. You always want to put the seed bed in ideal conditions, especially if you're planting ahead of a 2 to 4 inch rain. If the whole field looked like this, we would have had it planted a week ago. He says, pick me up on the south end. This was about 10 minutes ago. He's still going around the dang field. By the time this is all said and done, this whole field will be worked with a planter here. Things escalate very quickly out here in the farm. Change of plans again. If you can't tell, things are very sporadic. Jeff's now running the field cultivator. We're going to go ahead and work this field and plant it tomorrow morning if conditions are okay. See you guys later. Here's how she looks the next morning. I'd say we better go get the planter, put some seeds in the ground. We can finish up plant 2020 and start working on replant 2020. I'm going to go grab the planter. That way we can get this done. We're loading up some Don Mario 3.7 Enlist soybeans. A little bit different of a herbicide platform than what we normally run. All of the beans we planted up to this date are Roundup Ready 2 Extends. The battery was just about dead on the seed tender this morning, so I'm not going to shut it off until the planter's loaded. Seed tender's headed off. We're going to back the seed out of the ground just a hair, going into some lighter soil. Don't want them too deep. If they get a crust on top, we're going to have a lot of problems getting through that. We're going to back them all out. 3-3 showing, should be a good setting. We'll check when we're out in the field. I still remember how to do this, which is surprising. Only takes about 2 to 3 weeks for me to get a little rusty. You can see even the coulters on the planter have a little rust. Spin my meters, make sure the planter's primed. Good pile of beans behind me. Let's hit the field. I'd like to give a shout out to our glorious friends at John Deere, the EPA, and the interim Tier 4 motor system for derating my power as I'm trying to plant uphill. I'm going 5th gear right now, and I don't quite have enough power to even do that. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. Just crawling along here. Nothing runs like a deer. You know what I mean. We're about 3/4 away around the field the first time. It's a good time to double check our seed depth. Lined up, ready to put the next through in behind me. Field conditions are actually pretty good. The seed's about 1 inch deep, exactly where we want it. All of this ground in the surrounding area, if it gets a heavy rain on it, will turn into concrete on top. The shallower the beans are, the less they have to overcome. This ground does not suffer the same perils that our darker, more productive soils do. It takes a lot for this ground to lack moisture. It has an ability to hold moisture almost to a fault, whereas the darker ground, once you work it, airs out and the seed may not get any water to imbibe to start germination. But that's not going to be an issue here. You know, as you can see, even 1 inch down, you're already getting moisture. What's special about these soybeans that I'm putting in the ground right now, other than their brand, is their herbicide trait package. About 95% of our farm this year is in Roundup Ready 2 Extend soybeans, which primarily use dicamba or Extendamax as the trade name to help eliminate our broadleaves out in our field. This herbicide trait package is Enlist E3 soybeans. Enlist soybeans use a 2,4-D variant, very similar to dicamba in chemistry. They're both group 4 herbicides, a synthetic auxin. Their mode of action is primarily as a growth regulator. To put it simply, they cause broadleaf weeds to grow themselves to death very quickly. Their telltale signs are cupping the leaves, spindly growth of plant tissue, and they'll wilt a plant within 24 hours. The only group of plants that have a natural resistance to auxin herbicides are grasses such as corn. They do have some sensitivity to it, however it's not going to kill them. So soybeans as legumes would actually get smoked by dicamba or 2,4-D if they did not have genetically modified resistance to these herbicide programs. Group 4 synthetic auxin herbicides have been around since the 1940s. They are one of the first commercially available herbicides that were used in agriculture. 2,4-D, dicamba, etc. are all amazing at killing broadleafs. Now there is some water hemp resistance out and about. We have not personally seen that. Although the 2,4-D variant that Enlist use and the dicamba variant that Extend uses are very similar in chemical structure, even small changes in the chemical world result in massive differences in the organic interactions these herbicides have with the plants. A soybean that is resistant to the Enlist herbicide will not be resistant to the Extend herbicide. If we came out in this field and sprayed Extend, it would kill all of these beans. Likewise, if we sprayed Enlist on an Extend field, it would kill all those beans as well, even though they're both Group 4 herbicides and bred with resistance to their individual traded herbicide. As I was leaving that farm over in Windsor 2 weeks ago, I planted out the rest of my soybeans on the way out of the field. That way my tanks were empty. Any Extend soybeans that are left in here will die when we come out here to spray Enlist. Roundup Ready 2 Extend is a Bayer, formerly Monsanto product. Enlist E3 soybeans are a Dow, now Corteva product. Both Extend and Enlist soybeans actually were developed around the same time. However, Extend got market approval first, and because of that, took over the lion's share of the market. Extend soybeans have been the top dog in yield for years. As it currently stands, the main advantage of Extend soybeans is the amount of varieties that have been put into this platform. Extend is the top dog when it comes to yield. Enlist has been shown to lag behind probably 3 to 4 bushels at a minimum compared to Extend beans, but that is primarily because they were not commercially available at the same time Extend has been. Extend has 3 to 4 years of breeding ahead of it, and a lot of companies invested their whole genetic lineup into Extend soybeans. When a soybean trait package is put into the market, it takes a few years for companies to breed that genetic modification into their lineup so they can reach those top end yields. Enlist soybeans will be there in a few years, where most companies are showing that they do not yield as well as Extend at the current moment. Extend does have yield, however the Extend and dicamba platform is a very, very troublesome chemistry to be applying on fields. Dicamba as a herbicide has a lot of problems when it comes to its chemistry out in these fields. It's very effective at killing broadleafs, however it's very volatile and can drift out into other people's fields. Sensitive crops will get absolutely smoked by dicamba, and it's becoming a large issue across the Midwest. On the other hand, the Enlist 2,4-D variant is not volatile and is very friendly for farmers to apply. The only disadvantage is that the yield is not there yet. We like to put a non-volatile herbicide across from some of our neighbors that like to plant soybean varieties that are sensitive to dicamba. Even if you follow the label to a T, the dicamba chemistry has a way of picking up in the middle of the night and drifting around to your neighbors. It's nothing to do with poor application and poor principle by the operator. It's just the way the herbicide interacts in its environment. These Enlist soybeans were produced by Don Mario, a South American genetics company. These Don Mario genetics are produced, serviced, and sold by Burris Seed, courtesy of my friend Griffin Green, a member of the Burris Seed family, one of very few family seed companies remaining in the Midwest. One of the main reasons we're trying out this 3.7 Don Mario soybean variety, it is one of the only soybean varieties that I've seen in public plot data to actually yield with or out yield Extend beans. Every other company's Enlist bean is lagging way behind their Extend platform. In the upcoming years, with the exception of Bayer, all the other companies will have a very robust Enlist lineup. Many farmers do not like applying the dicamba herbicide out in their fields, but it's our only choice. For years, we got away with using Roundup as our primary broadleaf and grass control. Roundup does not possess the same punch that it did 15 years ago when it was first unleashed onto the fields. Nowadays, we have a handful of broadleafs and even grasses that can take a punch from Roundup and not even blink. I'm extremely excited to see how these soybeans yield out on our farm. I was a little disappointed that we broke down a couple weeks ago right ahead of that rain, as you saw the hydraulic leak we had in our planter on one of the previous videos, because I wanted these soybeans to be planted on a similar time frame as the rest of our farm to have good comparative yield data. Things don't always work out as we'd like them to. These soybeans are probably 2 to 3 weeks behind the rest of our farm. Will that cause a yield drag? I can't say for certain that it will. I do think that planting date is one of the largest determining factors on top end yield potential for soybeans. Maybe we'll have some comparative data from neighbors or other farms. That way we can kind of see how exactly these Don Mario Enlist soybeans produce on our farm. If that was anyone else's yard but Marty and Jan's, I would drive in it, but my mom takes very good care of that yard. I think I'd be in trouble if I left some ruts out there.
A little bit of a white spot right there.
A little bit of a white spot right there.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a white spot. Yeah, it's a little bit of a white spot. Yeah, it's a little bit of a white spot. Yeah, it's a little bit of a white spot. Yeah, it's a little bit of a white spot. Yeah, it's a little bit of a white spot. Yeah, it's a little bit of a white spot. Yeah, it's a little bit of a white spot. Yeah, it's a little bit of a white spot. Yeah, it's a little bit of a white spot. Yeah, it's a little bit of a white spot. Yeah, it's a little bit of a white spot. Yeah, it's a little bit of a white spot. Yeah, it's a little bit of a white spot. Yeah, it's a little bit of a white spot. Yeah, it's a little bit of a white spot. Yeah, it's a little bit of a white spot. Yeah, it's a little bit of a white spot. Yeah, it's a little bit of a white spot. Yeah, it's a little bit of a white spot. Yeah, it's a little bit of a white spot. Yeah, it's a little bit
Not that bad. Tile's bubbling up. Worked out perfectly. I was gonna have to shoot through it with the planter. No chance I'm leaving that spot and coming back later. I'd plant it right now. Unfolding the last field of Plant 2020 for the first time. Let's get this cracked out so we can be done and start thinking about replanting some beans. The end is in sight, but go figure, we gotta get some seed first. There it is, the last pass of 2020. And how fitting that we get to end with an inlet. I'm gonna dump the rest of these Don Mario beans out. That way when we go back to replant our extend beans, we have the right herbicide technology in there. Not very much in here. Finally, after a 3-week hiatus, we've crossed the finish line with the soybean planter. The corn planter was done a long time ago. It's already replanted some. Now all we can do is wait, hope this crop comes up, and then we don't have to do any more replanting. Highly unlikely. We usually have to go back out there and at least spot in a few areas. Once we're done with that, we'll call it quits with the corn planter probably mid-June, and then after that we can wash the planter off and put it away for good. The bean planter though will be hooked on all the way through probably the end of July. You can still get beans in the ground that late in the season and still be able to cut them at the end of the year for a productive yield. There's not going to be 80 to 90 bushel yield potential replanting that late. However, it's better than having nothing out there. You can still get 40 or 50 bushels if you're lucky. Maybe 30 is more realistic. I'm certainly glad to have all of our soybean seed in the ground. Better late than never. All of our acres are in the second week of May. We didn't finish up last year until maybe the first week of June. We're significantly ahead of schedule in comparison to last year. Versus our average trend though, we're right on pace. Usually we finish up the first or second week of May if conditions are appropriate. We like to start around mid-April and finish around May if we can. You never know what you're gonna get in between there, so it's hard to put a certain quantity on how many days it takes to plant because you may not have the same capacity every year to plant a week straight. You might plant one day, get a rain, plant another day, get a rain. You just gotta roll with the punches on that one. All we can do now is just wait and see how the crop develops in the weather conditions we have coming up in the next week. We've got quite a bit of rain forecasted. I'm hopeful that we'll dodge a little bit of that. The only occupation that makes financial guys look good are the weather guys. No offense to all the weather people out there. You just have an extremely hard job. That's gonna be it for today. As you can tell, I'm extremely excited to be done planting. Let's see if we can get 500 likes on this video just to celebrate being done with planting. As always, thanks for tuning in. Have a great day. Like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you want to see more, and comment if you have any questions. Have a good night. Peace!